Welcome to the September 12th, 2023 City of Escondido Planning Commission meeting. If we could all rise for the flag salute, Commissioner Maccaro will lead us.
Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can we have the roll call?
Chair Paul.
Yes, present.
Vice Chair Barbe. Absent. Commissioner Barber.
President, I want to take one moment to highlight our little patriot that's sitting there in the green shirt. She stood so proudly during yes, you. She stood so proudly during the Pledge of Allegiance. Just give her a hand. But yes, I'm here.
Commissioner Fitzgerald.
Present.
Commissioner Maccaro.
Here.
Commissioner Spear.
Here.
And Commissioner Weiler.
Here.
Okay, and before we move on, our Deputy City Manager, Chris McKinney, would like to make an announcement.
Thank you, Chair Paul and members of the Commission. It's perhaps ironic that I am here to introduce someone who is much more familiar to the Commission than I am, but I'm here to introduce her in a new role. I'm happy to announce that Veronica Morones is the new city planner for the City of Escondido. She'll be joining you on the die from this point forward. I think you'll agree that Veronica brings strong intelligence, work ethic, and frankly, just a love of planning to this position. So it was an easy offer for me to make, perhaps not quite so easy for her to accept, but I am very grateful that ultimately she did. And I just wanted to make that announcement to the Commission and ask you to join me in congratulating her and welcoming her to this position. Thank you.
Excellent choice.
Right, very good. Thank you. I think we're all glad to have you, Veronica. Okay, first item, approval of the minutes from the August 22nd meeting. Do I have any questions for staff or a motion?
Approval of the minutes.
Second?
I second.
Commissioners, voting has been opened, so if you refresh your screens for the vote.
Oh, that's right. I think I did it.
The voting is shown as 6-0 to approve the minutes.
Okay, now written communications and oral communications. Anyone here is here to address the Commission on something that's not on the agenda? All right. And we have one written communication just presented to us. Is this for one of the items tonight?
I don't know anything more than what's written there. It didn't state that it was for an item, so I honestly don't know.
Like it was item PL 230174, which
So that's our next item, public hearing, PL 230174, Christ Community Reformed Church. Jay Paul presenting?
Yes.
All
Good
right.
evening, Commissioners. Jay Paul, Senior Planner. Item 2 on tonight's agenda is a request by Christ Community Reformed.
Sorry, one second. Do we have any disclosures from commissioners? I forget to do that sometimes. All right, sorry, Jay, go ahead.
Yes, a request by Christ Community Reformed Church to add a 2,400 square foot modular building on the existing campus site to use for additional classroom and meeting space. The church came upon these modular buildings. They were offered to be donated to them, and they needed to take advantage of that. So they moved them on to the church facility, the site, and secured them and would not be allowed to occupy the space until a decision was made by the Planning Commission regarding the conditional use permit and appropriate building permits issued. So they've been sitting on the site for several months and secured while they process this conditional use permit with the city. The church, a little bit of background. The property is about 6.8 acres. It's situated in a typically residential neighborhood. It's been there since 1963. And if any of you remember the church, it was constructed under county permit, and it was a drive-in church. There was approximately 66 parking spaces in the back, set up at different elevations with poles, and the traditional, if you've ever been to the old drive-in theaters with the speakers on the windows. Later that changed to use the car radios. After that, those were taken out and it operated more as a traditional church. Annexed in 1975, since that time, they've modified their use permit through the city to expand the sanctuary, then modify that to do a smaller sanctuary and multi-purpose buildings. None of those permits or for the building additions were finalized, and those had expired. However, the preschool that was approved continues to operate on the site. Views of the property here, you can see in the back, these are the modular buildings. They came in 4 sections, and they will, if a building permit is issued, put them together. You can see here, this is looking south towards the site from the parking lot. These are the 4 sections. This is looking west toward, in the back there are residential properties that back up to the property. This is looking north towards the site, and the properties are probably 60 or so feet to the west or of this property on the side. The structure would be approximately 40 feet by 60 feet. It's single story in height. Working with staff and some meetings with the applicants, originally the structure was going to be placed closer to the property line. They realized that would create potential issues for adjacent neighbors for neighborhood compatibility, use of the facility, visual impacts, so they moved it potentially farther away. It would be 60 feet away from the property boundary. The minimum setback in that area is 5 feet. That would be set at 6 feet or 60 feet back and towards the rear of the facility. Right now, that's probably unused space in the back that was used for previous landscaping and open space. The facility would require, in this area here, they met with several of the neighbors on the west to address some of their potential issues. And one of those was screening and privacy into the facility. So they erected, based on a recommendations request from the neighbors, a 6-foot high fence along the property boundary that was recently installed. It used to be a chain link fence to block the views of potential noise, compatibility, buffer in that area. So that actually has already been installed. The structure, again, about 15 feet in height, resembles a commercial type of residential structure or commercial type of structure with storefront entrances and windows. The entries will be on the elevations not facing the adjacent residents to the west, so they wouldn't have additional conflicts. It'll contain about 4 classrooms, a kitchen area and bathroom. It'll be used for additional space to support the existing preschool and ancillary uses such as meetings and Sunday school uses. The project qualifies for exemption under CEQA, so no additional environmental review was required. No impacts were associated or identified with the project. Staff is recommending approval of the project and with 2 additional conditions. The staff report indicates that the current congregation is 100 with 50 preschool. The previous CUPs didn't restrict the amount of preschool students, and CUPs typically don't restrict the amount of congregation. That is restricted by the amount of parking and the assembly area. So we want to put some additional information so it would clarify that this CUP doesn't restrict the congregation. Congregations can go up and down as the community needs and the facility warrants. And the preschool, we thought, since the previous CUPs did not put a cap, and usually we do that, to address parking, neighborhood compatibility. They currently have 50. It's gone up over the decades, it's gone down, and we thought based on previous use permits that we've approved for similar operations, that 100 would be more than adequate to address future growth of the preschool. If they exceeded that, they could come back and modify the use permit as necessary, and the applicant agrees with that stipulation. Therefore, staff is recommending approval of the project and adopt the environmental determination that was issued. That concludes staff's presentation.
Does the commission have any questions for staff?
My question would actually be for Owen. Owen, did you happen to have a chance to see this last-minute communication?
Yeah, I've just now glanced at, literally about the same time you did.
So, I mean, do you want to address whether or not there's concerns about the safety of the students crossing the streets, and if there's any additional need for any measures by the city to help improve their safety?
Okay. Do we want to read it into the, I mean, I don't mind, I can do it whatever order you want.
I asked the chair or...
Go ahead and answer his question.
Okay. Let me, should I read it in or just start to answer?
That would be a great idea.
Okay, all right. This email was sent in by a Chad Hawk. Doesn't give an address, but the comment is as follows. Worried about traffic being backed up and causing more accidents on Felicita and Redwood Street with no child crossing or crosswalks for school zone. This really needs to be addressed as slowing down the area when kids are present and possibly create a flashing yellow caution zone for crossing or when children are present. Another option would be adding an additional stoplight at Felicita and Redwood Street intersection. Chad Hawk. I would just say that this intersection has been evaluated by our traffic department quite recently. Both due to requests at that intersection, as well as that segment to the bend. There's a sharp bend to the west. And it did not meet warrants for a four-way stop. And not being a four-way stop, we're reluctant to provide it as a kind of an uncontrolled crossing at this time. It was further evaluated in 2021, 2022, when we did our local road safety plan. We got a grant from the state, and this was one of the areas that that was identified for further evaluation. And we looked at the intersection, didn't make changes to the intersection, but did make additional safety changes to the bend and the signage. So it's kind of what I have, kind of on late notice here. So,
thank you. Any other questions for staff?
Thank you, Owen. I just want to say thanks. I appreciate your input.
I do have a question. So I'm thinking about, I really like the growth of the preschool. I'm very familiar with that church in that area. Regarding the traffic, though, because of the hours that the kids are going to be dropped off and picked up, and that's also a very highly traveled on, well, it's a thoroughfare to get to the freeway during rush hour. My only concern would be the speed limit. It is currently, I don't believe it's a 25, and it would have to be for the school area. Would that be an issue, or would that be something that we would need to look into? And then and if that's so, I understand that we, as far as having the stop signs or the stop light, I don't think that's necessary. the speed limit is a concern for me when they're during the hours of the school operating, and maybe the flashing light just to let them know or be aware of the speed limit. Are there any plans for that, or has that been thought through?
Yeah, I mean, it was not identified as a school zone because being a preschool, I think they're typically not identified as a school zone. If you go further to the north, I'm trying to think what street you're at there, 15th, you're starting to get up near Felicita Elementary School, and that is a school zone. And we've done a lot of school crossing improvements in that area. I'm trying to think. I may have missed part of your question.
Well, you answered it as far as that would not be considered a school zone because it's a preschool. So that answered. And my concern was just as far as during the drop-off and pickup times, because there might be children in the area on foot, if it would be something, and I don't know if it would be something that we need to consider about having a 25-mile-an-hour. You said it was not a school zone, but still there are going to be children present, and then also vehicles slowing down, pulling over. 100 students is not a lot of traffic. But still, that was just something that I'm wondering if it's something we should consider.
Yeah, and from our understanding, and maybe we can hear a little more about, their plans, but there weren't plans to increase their enrollment or their membership at this time. What was else? When we did the traffic warrants to evaluate that, making that a four-way stop, we would have a big component of that scoring would have been counting pedestrians. And, so that when we did that, I'm assuming that the numbers didn't meet that criteria.
I'm in agreement with that. It wouldn't be for a four-way stop because that would also be a congestion issue a traffic congestion issue. And it's not necessary there, but I was just thinking of the flashing lights to have people slow down and the speed limit during those hours. Maybe we should consider.
Yeah, and we do in our traffic section. We do have a program, and it's kind of handled through our Transportation and Safety Commission, Transportation and School Safety Commission, where crossings and things like this can be evaluated and are routinely improved. But likewise, it's based on kind of a scoring. So they're usually competing against other projects. We'll usually have 5 or 6 projects and maybe funding for about 2 or 3 per year. And it's based on scoring. And so things like the number of pedestrians, would come into play. But that is another potential, I could definitely put that on the list. I suspect we've looked at it to some. We looked at it with our the local road safety plan in pretty good detail. But that is another area that we could, or another program through which we could analyze it again for, like you say, what we would typically do is a rapid red flashing beacon. But there again, we got to see. There's a lot of safety criteria to be able to use the different types of safety devices.
Thank you.
Commissioner Spears.
When I have a follow-up question, to your knowledge, are there similar types of conditions throughout the city, preschool conditions, similar size, that we can look to for precedent on traffic situations? Do you recall anything that's similar?
Yeah, I'm just trying to. I'm coming up with a blank on a preschool.
Nothing
right now. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, public comment. Do we have people who would like to speak? Alex.
Yes, we do. First up would be Mary Weiler.
So how many speakers do we have?
I'm holding 8 speaker slip requests.
Okay. So 3 minutes, please. You don't have to take all 3 minutes.
My name is Mary Weller. You got it right the first time. Not everyone does, so thank you. Dear council members, I'm an Escondido native. I love this place, and I'm here tonight to commend this request and to stand in favor of it. Infusion Preschool served an important role in my family's life when my son was young. At the time, my husband was underemployed during an economic downturn, which has hit us pretty hard, and it sent me back into the workforce. My son was a fairly quiet, really shy kid, and I was concerned about how he'd adjust to going from being home with me full-time to being dropped off with strangers while his mommy worked. But all my fears and my tears ended up being for nothing, because rather than simply surviving preschool at Infusion on this campus, he thrived. After the first day, rather than pulling him off of me while we both cried and leaving him with an ache in my heart each morning, I watched him tear to the gate in front of me, completely excited for the day to begin. And in fact, my son loved Infusion so much that my sister-in-law enrolled her son there as well, so that he had his best buddy cousin with him for a long time too. They're both giant 6'4" teenagers now, but they speak of that time with so much fondness, and it really allowed me to go to work with peace in my heart, and that allowed our family to stay in our home, which was a big deal for us. It might be odd to hear me speak on behalf of a preschool that my son hasn't attended to for over a decade, but a funny thing happened recently before I even knew that this meeting was taking place. I was on the campus of the school for a different work project that I had to do, and to my surprise and delight, I ran into a family friend of mine with her little son. We'd been praying for this little boy in our friend group because he was terrified of starting preschool, and then we were celebrating with her because he was really starting to adjust well, and I had had no idea that the preschool he was going to was Infusion on this campus. And when that little guy came through the gate, it was with a giant smile on his face, and I thought, oh, I know that kind of smile. This is a little kiddo who's thriving. So some years have gone by, but the benefit of a preschool like the one that Infusion Christian Preschool is to our community hasn't changed. I'm so glad to know that they're still there. I'm so glad to know that they're helping the little ones in our community as they learn and grow, and I'd ask you to help them in whatever way you need to assist what they need in their vital mission for our precious community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have a Robin Kimball.
Alex, can you turn that mic on?
I don't believe I can.
Get out of your way here.
My name is Robin Kimball. I live right next door to the church, just off the, what do you call it, the parking lot. I really like the place. They are a good influence. All those little kids are adorable. I like to go to their food bank on Saturday. It's very nice. They're a good place. They need to have this thing happen.
Thank you. Very good.
Thank you.
Next, we have Brian Menelonakos. And after this gentleman would be Robert Balfour. Just to let you know you're ready.
Fellow council members, planning members, thank you for the opportunity to hear the public on this. I just want to, and I won't be 3 minutes, I guarantee. I am an active member of this church, and I know what love this church has for the kids, for the preschool. And I also know that those structures have been sitting there for some months, and we've followed the letter of the law. Not only haven't they been, I think the word used was occupied, there hasn't been a single foot, a single shoe enter into that structure, but I'm tired of looking at those places being not occupied. So I hope you not only approve this, but I hope it can move forward in a fairly expeditious manner. I think this will be a real excellent thing for the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next speaker will be Robert Balfour. The next speaker up after that will be Ms. Mary Kimball.
Good evening. My name is Robert Balfour. I've lived in Escondido for almost 25 years, and I am a retired meteorologist, and I'm affiliated with Bethel Southern Baptist Church. My family has used some of the ministries at what used to be Infusion is now Christ Community Reformed Church. In particular, my daughters, when they were teenagers, they helped out in some of the ministries there. Most recently, during the COVID lockdown and whatnot, we used their food distribution bank, not just so much for ourselves, but for several of the families that were needy in our neighborhood over by Orange Glen, and also to several widows in the church that we attend at Bethel. Since then, we've attended several special functions they put on. They have guest lectures, world-renowned guest lectures, as well as holiday services that our church did not provide, like a Christmas service because it was on Sunday. The need for this building, I think it's a great idea. With the food bank, we discovered that through talking with one of the assistant pastors, that the food storage for that food was being shared with the preschool, so it was limited. And also there was a significant amount of time involved with the setup and breakdown of a temporary position to do distribution. So from what I understand, that may be used in this new facility, and that would provide dedicated food storage, and I'm suppositioning here, a fixed food distribution site. The setup time would be reduced, and also it would reduce the traffic congestion by having people who are going to the food distribution having to park across the street and then wait for them to open up. So those are my points. I hope you'll consider them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Mary Kimball. Following will be Jonathan Shader. You're ready.
I live in the first house right contiguous on Felicita, and I lived there since January of 2016. I've been a person that fixed up old antique houses. I'm old now, but I never lived next to a church before. And I didn't know how it would be, but I have found it to be just fine. I never heard one sound. I think it's a lovely neighbor. They keep the place up very nicely. And I think this little school they're going to have over there would be just fine. I would be a welcome neighbor.
The next speaker is Jonathan Sheeter, and followed by Jillian Allen next, please.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Sheeter. I've been a member of the church for several years now, and I just wanted to say that the additional space would be beneficial for my children. 2 of my children are here with me, and the other 3 are with their mother at soccer practice. We've got a lot of kids at church, and they like to run around and have fun, and we need space for them to do what they do Sunday morning. And thank you for hearing us out.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Jillian Allen, be followed by John Gagliano.
Good evening. I have been an Escondido resident since 1997. I live right on Redwood, really close to that intersection and that school. And my daughter back there is a student there. And it's just such a really good place with so much potential that they just bring out in all the kids. And I would really be excited to see all the things that they can do with more space to learn and grow. I think it would be really exciting for our family and give me a little peace of mind for after school, when I'm still at work and she is, out of elementary school. So I really support everything that they do and they promote, and I think their ideas are pretty good, and the rest of the community should too. And also, you're talking about the red tape with the blinking light and all that kind of thing, but it's a really wide road. Maybe you could make it 2 lanes and have like a turning lane into the parking lot so it wouldn't get congested or something. But I haven't noticed a problem in dropping off my little girl with people getting backed up or anything yet. But thank you for hearing me.
Thank you.
Next speaker would be John Gagliano, and followed by Rick Jelly, sorry.
You got the name right. That's rare. Thank you. My wife Cindy and I are residents of Escondido up on Ridgecrest Place, southwest Escondido, but we also own 1755 South Redwood Street. My son and his fiance live there. We've improved the home. We've met neighbors. All of a sudden, they start bringing on these structures. I'm going to call them bungalows. After 5 o'clock one day, my son calls me, and wow, I remember going to school in LA after the earthquake in the 70s. We went to school in bungalows. It was awful. No air conditioning, overcrowded. Look, I'm not going to speak against preschools, food banks. I have to go by my gut feel and my first impressions. My first impressions were they weren't getting permits. They were just shooting from the hip, dropping these buildings off, putting them on shabby wooden stilts, crooked. There was trenches that children were playing in, neighborhood children. I went there, I submitted photos to the city of tiny children playing with toys in open trenches, stacks of slabs of concrete near our fence, all but teetering away, structures blocking our sunset view. Well, we went and talked to the church, and first impressions didn't change a whole lot. I'm very concerned. Well, now it's on the table. Regulations must be followed now. Before my complaints and my talking and communicating, it was scary. It was sketchy. So lovely that the parishioners and parents of kids can come talk about this. And I'm not going to speak out against it. I know there's a lot of speeding going on Redwood Street. We had police officers check it and write a lot of tickets. Well, there's going to be probably more speeding. We also had one person run through the property to get to the church. So I have a lot of concerns. I would hope for a good 60-foot setback. I would hope for nothing after hours. You know, when I went to church, it was Sunday Mass. Now it's food banks, preschools. Do they have permission to have schools at a church? Is it zoned for that? I don't know. Again, I'm not against it. I just want some closely followed permits, regulations, communications with neighbors, respecting our feelings about noise and sunset views, and not having traffic and speeding in the area. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
They need to be watched closely.
Thank you.
Our final speaker would be Rick Jeldy.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for giving me a minute to speak here. I just want to echo what was said earlier. I don't want to speak out against, preschools or food banks or anything like that either. I do see the value in that. Certainly don't want to disparage anybody personally, that's in this room. But I will say what the presentation and the pictures and everything they don't really show is, one day my wife and I woke up and the sunset views that were outside in our backyard through the lovely chain fence that was there. So we could see the views were completely immiserated by these three, I'll call them trailers. And on each side of the trailer, it's kind of like open, I guess. You can kind of like put them all together, and there's like a big piece of plastic just like blowing in the wind, and they're up on these slabs. And, we had concerns about that. We very, very much enjoyed the view we had and the chain link fence that we had so we could see that view. And we did go and talk to the church. And in that meeting that we had with them, it did become kind of apparent that at least at that time, they had applied for a conditional use permit or something to that effect, but there were some questions that the city had about that prior to granting that permit, and those questions had not been answered, at least as of that time, but there those buildings still sat. And so it's our concern that, if they would be willing to just have the buildings dumped on the property, forgive me, but permit be damned, that we might continue to have issues like this with the church going forward. What they said about the fence was correct. We do have a fence there, We do appreciate the fact that they built the fence. What I will say about the fence is, it's probably the worst fence I've ever seen in my entire life. It's crooked. It's uneven. It starts on one level, goes up in the middle, and comes down. And then for large swaths of the fence on the ground, there's a good foot gap, probably. So there is a fence, but the fence is what it is, And so based upon that and the factors that I mentioned about the permit, I just want to echo that as residents of the area, we have deep concerns as related to the church's ability to comply with regulations, and we just want to make sure that there's disclosure, transparency. We're concerned about noise in the evening, and we just request that if the city does choose to grant these permits, that the activity at the church be heavily monitored. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who hasn't turned in a speaker slip that would like to speak? All right, thank you. Commissioners, comments, questions?
Just say that I believe it provides a vital community service that we need. I will move approval of Resolution 2023-17 with staff's additional conditions.
I'll second that.
So any other comments? So I had a couple of questions, Jay.
Yes.
One is that there is a condition that was put in that you didn't mention about some shrubbery on the side of the building.
Right.
What brought about that condition?
Wanted to have some additional buffer rather than just, a fence and a building on that side. So from a visual impact, you can have a little bit more, scenery than a side of a building and a fence as you look over.
So can you see the side of the building? Because now that there's solid fence along the property line, from the residents on the other side of the fence, can they see the building still?
I didn't go over on the neighbors' properties based on, it's only 15 feet tall to the ridge line.
Right.
So at 60 feet, depend probably how tall you are on the other side to look over. I just want to have that extra bit of buffer that the applicant is agreed to also do that.
Okay, and I did have a question for the applicant about that requirement, and then about this new one capping the enrollment at 100 students. Is there someone from the applicant that could address that?
Good evening.
Hi. Could you introduce yourself, sir?
My name's Gary Cass. I'm the pastor at Christ Community Reformed Church.
Okay. And are you okay with this requirement for the landscaping?
Sure.
And for the 100 students?
Yes.
So are you saying that under duress, or is it really okay?
It's fine. Typically, we've run about 70 students. So, and right now we're at 50, but we're on the way up again after COVID. So I think once we get to 70, we'll be fine. And that seems to be historically we've operated.
Okay. 'Cause I didn't want to impose a condition on you that in a year you'd be coming back again and saying, oh, can we get 150 or something? So
I think 70 is really about right relative to other concerns that we have with staffing and ratios and things of that nature.
Okay, great. And anybody else?
Yes, Mr. Paul, a couple of speakers brought up their concerns about permitting and such. Could you kind of inform us on, what goes into the permitting process, at least from this point, to assure them that, all the safety measures and everything must be put in place in order to secure their permit, kind of that process briefly?
Correct. So briefly, should the use permit be approved tonight with the conditions, the next step is to, before they put those together and begin operation, it'll have to sit, on an appropriate foundation, a slab, or on piers. So some minor earth moving will be necessary. May not trigger a grading permit, but appropriate drainage for that engineering looked at initially. They'll have to build ramps for access to that. They'll be hooking up to electrical and to plumbing. So they've been working with our utilities on where those utilities were and did they have the proper fall. And fire was had the most issues. They wanted to make sure they had access to that, and none of the existing parking spaces conflicted with that. So you have 24 feet of access, and whether that was going to have the appropriate fire alarms and safety systems have to be demonstrated. Building also have to meet all the building codes before they get occupancy for that. So they have to go through another step, which is the building permit process before they can get occupancy.
And then as they go through this on the construction side, various inspections occur along the way to ensure that all of this is taken care of properly?
Craig, it'll mostly be from the building department.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Concerns for Sunset View, but we're talking about nothing exceeding 15 feet in elevation, which is a single-story structure that is already, there are single-story structures. Trees are at that height. The second concern was noise. I don't believe this is any change of use of any kind, correct? This is simply a continuation of what's already being done.
Correct.
Okay. That's all I have. Thanks.
Well, you stole my line, but I did have an additional concern regarding the residents. I know the good that's being done in the community, and I commend that. Also, from a resident's point of view, as far as complaints about the aesthetics of the fences and such, I think that it's important to consider, have we looked at that? Is it going to be something? I'm thinking of property value. I'm thinking of, they bought there because of the field. We can't control the trees and the buildings on somebody else's property. But as far as what they see from their yards, is that something that has been looked into to make sure that it is not just to code, but also, that it's built right so it doesn't look displeasing to them?
But that's kind of difficult to answer because building a fence up to 7 feet tall does not require a building permit, so it wouldn't require any inspections by the city. So it's kind of, the quality of the workmanship is more of, since we didn't regulate that or condition that for the project, is kind of between the property owner and the neighbors in the church, to be honest with you.
Thank you.
Okay, would you repeat your motion?
Approve Resolution 2023-17 with the additional conditions added by staff.
And the second was?
Second that.
Great. Can we have the vote, please?
Voting has been open.
New system, folks.
Did you hit refresh? You tried refresh?
Yeah, yeah.
You could just give your vote orally if you'd like, if it's not working.
There's no refresh.
Yeah. So Alex, would you call for the vote?
So I guess you can call for the vote at the moment. I guess since system's a bit tricky at the moment. So Commissioner Paul?
Yes, approve.
Commissioner Barber?
Yes.
Commissioner Maccaro?
Approve.
Commissioner Weiler?
Yes.
Commissioner Fitzgerald?
Approve.
And Commissioner Spear?
Approve.
The vote is 6-0 to approve Resolution 2023-17.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for coming. If you're going to leave, could you please do it quietly? We have another hearing right behind you. All right, the next item, PL 230176 and ADM 19-0092 Vermont Avenue Apartments is presented by, I'm sorry, before we do the staff report, any disclosures from the commission? No, okay. Staff report, Greg Mattson.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. This is Greg Mattson calling. See everybody here? Great. Contract plan for the City of Escondido Planning Department. Tonight you are considering the merits of an application requested to modify a major plot plan conditional approval related to offsetting costs associated with funding of ongoing municipal services. You may recall a couple of months ago, maybe about 6-8 months ago, there was 2 other projects that came forward and they were asking for a waiver. In this case, tonight we're asking for a modification. So just some general background here. Click there, one more. There you go. So general background, the project is Vermont Avenue Apartments located at 1860 South Escondido Boulevard, which was approved for 44 units, includes 4 deed-restricted affordable units. This project was approved by City Council on April 5th, 2022. As noted, the applicant's requesting a modification to the major plot plan to eliminate the requirements to offset the costs associated with the funding of the municipal services. All our project components are approved and are not subject to appeal or modifications tonight. As you're aware, the city initiated discussions regarding the funding support of ongoing municipal services back in 2019. City Council in 2020 restated their desire to have a development pay for these ongoing costs of providing municipal services for the City of Escondido. This requirement was approved by City Council and went into effect on May 13, 2020. In mid-2021, the City Council approved the special tax rate for CFD 2020-1. The special tax is collected on the property owner's annual tax bills and used to offset costs for services. Tonight, the role of the Planning Commission is to consider whether to recommend to City Council to eliminate or to uphold the director's decision requiring the CFD funding for municipal services. The Planning Commission cannot modify a major plot plan condition requiring the funding of ongoing municipal services. Only the City Council can do that tonight or tomorrow. Planning Commissioner's recommendation to City Council can be twofold. One, to eliminate the requirement for ongoing funding with municipal services, or uphold the director's decision and deny the applicant's request for the modification of the CFD requirement. Recommendation tonight is, from staff, is to adopt Resolution 2023-15, recommended the City Council, Planning Commission would recommend City Council deny the request to modify the major plot plan, thus upholding the funding requirement that was applied back in 2022 when it was approved. Or the Planning Commission can adopt Resolution 2023-16, recommend the City Council approve the request and going with the applicant to modify the major plot plan, thus eliminating the funding requirement that's been applied to the project. Short and sweet, straightforward, and that ends the staff's presentation. We're here to ask any questions. I also believe that the applicant team's here is available for questions if you have anything of the applicant itself related to the modification.
Do you have questions for staff, or can we hear the applicant first?
You can hear the applicant first.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Andrea Contreras. I'm a land use attorney and I represent the applicant in this matter. What we're asking for is that you eliminate the application of the CFD to this project by modifying the major plot plan permit and eliminating that condition. And the reason that we're asking for this is that the cost of the CFD condition is on top of the more than $1.7 million in development impact fees that this project will pay, on top of an increase of property taxes from $7,000 a year to more than $170,000 a year, simply is too much of a burden for this kind of a project to be successful. It's a working class housing project. It's infill development. It's going to provide affordable housing, and to add the CFD on top of that is just it's simply too burdensome. I'll also remind you that the legal status of the CFD is still in question. There is a lawsuit that's been filed questioning the constitutionality of it, and we believe that while that question is still unanswered, that the CFD should not be applied. The City Council waived this requirement for a similar project last year. This is a slightly different process, but we're basically asking for the same thing, and so we're asking that today you grant our request and recommend that the City Council remove the CFD. I think that's condition of approval 15. Thank you.
Thank you. Deliberation. Question. Mr. Spears.
There was a reference made to a previous City Council waive for a project of the CFD. Do we have reference to what project that was?
Yes, so the projects in reference are the projects related, over here, hi, to the South Escondido. There were two projects on South Escondido Boulevard that went through the appeal process as they were in their appeal period after decision, requesting that the condition be removed.
And opposite precedent question, are there other properties that have complied with CFDs and not have had exemptions?
I believe that the staff report does list several projects that entailed CFD compliance and the total number of units.
I have a question regarding the timing of the request. Why, if this was approved, this is a difference from what I'm hearing of the precedent that was mentioned, that was during the appeal period. Why are we going back after the appeal period to make this request, is my question, perhaps for the applicant.
I wasn't involved when the project was approved. My client purchased the project after approval, so I don't know the answer to that question. It's the timing, I suppose.
Thank you.
If I could ask staff, has the City Council changed their policy on requiring that this CFD be still conditioned on projects? Because it seems like this appeal has come before us, and granted, timing is different. So, Commissioner Spear brings up a good point. But I believe that upon appeal, it went up to City Council. Did City Council grant the applicant's appeal of that condition? Do you recall?
Yes, so that is correct. City Council upheld those appeals, and just to clarify, tonight's request is not an appeal of their decision. It's simply a modification to the already approved plot plan, requesting the modification entail this removal of this condition.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Greg, I just want to point out one thing in the staff report, Greg. There's some dates in here of April 14th, 2020, and that predates this project. So on page 46 of the staff report, it said under fiscal analysis, the first sentence in fiscal analysis dated April 14th, 2020, and at the bottom, attachment 3, it says April 14th, 2020. And those dates are just not correct. Just wanted to point that out. Anything else? Oh, and I guess I also want to point out that you gave us two choices here, 2023-15 and 2023-16, and I don't believe there's a -16 in the staff report, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
It's an option that if the plan commissioners decide that they want to go ahead and recommend the council to approve the request, we would transfer that out. But right now, currently, the staff recommendation is to deny the applicant's request, and that's 23-15.
-15, right. Okay, do I have a motion?
I will comment and then make a motion. And my personal perspective is we use developer fees appropriately to mitigate the impacts, the immediate impacts of a new project that's been built in our city. For ongoing impacts and services needed, in my perspective, that's where property taxes come into play, and those should be funded by property taxes, not additional fees. And I'm especially concerned when we're considering adding $100,000 a year in additional cost to this project is counterproductive, in my opinion, to our affordable housing goals that we're trying to achieve. I believe precedent has been set, accepting that we want to help reduce the cost applied to new projects, that when they're providing affordable housing, by not only the city council's actions, but as I recall, on the two projects in question, the planning commission supported waiving those fees. So I would be making a motion to approve the request for the modification.
I would second that.
Okay, so I just want one clarification before we vote on that. The CFDs are $32,000 a year total, not over $100,000.
I was using the number that the attorney provided.
She's talking about this, the real estate taxes, because it's going to be, instead of 4 houses, it's going to be 44-unit apartment building. The real estate taxes annually are going to be $100 and something thousand. The CFD's $32,000.
Do you agree with his assessment?
Yeah, that's correct. The number that I gave you it goes actually from $7,000 a year to $170,000 a year in property taxes. I'm not sure if that $30,000 number is correct, though. I'd have to look at my notes.
It's based on the special tax rate that the council has already approved for the 22-23 tax rate, based on the number of units and the current fiscal rate for that. So we calculate that at $32,000, yes, based on the current tax rate.
That's on top of the property taxes.
Right.
That's on top of the developer impact fees. That we
Thank you.
All right, so I appreciate the clarification and the correction, but I still do not
Okay.
want to add cost to the
All right.
project.
So we have a recommendation for 2023-16 and a second call for the vote.
Oh, could we continue with discussion before we call for the vote?
Sure.
For my consistency purposes, in the prior votes that went to city council, I was supporting the policy that's in place that has not changed, and so I'm not going to support the motion, I guess. So I just wanted to at least give a clarification as to why I don't support it. I'm maintaining my consistency.
Well, right. I'm not supporting it either.
In that light, I'd like to state my position as well, clarification before the vote, and I'm in agreement with that idea. There are a couple things I have a hard time with. One of them is the fact that this is a policy that has been implemented by the city council. The other issue I have is the timing of this. This was an approved project. It had a period of time for an appeal. That was exceeded. There are other properties that are paying for this fair share. So that's my position.
Can we have the vote?
Voting has been opened, and as a reminder, this is to recommend approval of the request.
Right. Oh. Yes, it's not working, dude.
Mine had trouble, but I think it went.
You got it.
Oops, maybe.
The vote is 2-4 with 2 votes approval of Commissioner Barber and Commissioner Maccaro, and the votes for nay would be Chair Paul, Commissioner Weiler, Fitzgerald, and Spear.
So do I have another motion?
I have a motion. My motion is to adopt the resolution recommending City Council deny the waiver request and uphold the director's decision and the condition of approval is contained in the letter and the staff report.
I'll second that.
So for clarification, that's a recommendation for 2023-15.
Correct.
Call for the vote.
Voting has been reopened, so please refresh the screen again, and it should provide the option to vote. The voting appears to be 3-3, I believe, if everybody has been refreshed. It gets a little bit tricky if we re-vote, so.
Look at that.
Turn off on that one. There we go. Yeah, it took a bit on that one. I apologize for the delay on that. All right. So the voting is 4-2 to approve the recommendation of denial. Votes for aye would be Chair Paul, Commissioner Weiler, Commissioner Fitzgerald, and Commissioner Spear. The votes for nay would be Commissioner Barber and Commissioner Maccaro.
Thank you very much. Next item is current business, PL 23-0061, comprehensive sign ordinance update from Ivan Flores.
Thank you, Chair Paul. I'm Ivan Flores, Senior Planner with the Planning Division, and I will be providing a brief update on the comprehensive sign ordinance update. Just for some background, the sign ordinance was adopted by City Council on November 4th, 1992. Through a separate resolution in 1993, the City Council adopted design guidelines. Over the last several decades, the Chapter 60, Article 66 has been amended several times. The present effort today represents the first comprehensive update to the sign ordinance, which is also known as Article 66. Our efforts to date are that we initiated the process in spring of 2023. As some of you recall, on May 23rd, 2023, staff requested the formation of a subcommittee which consisted of Chair Paul, Vice Chair Barbe, and Commissioner Barber. Planning staff met with the subcommittee twice over the course of June to discuss the direction of the update. On August 7th, 2023, planning staff met with the City Council Economic Development Subcommittee to review the proposed changes that came about from the Planning Commission Subcommittee. Here's a brief overview of the proposed changes, and this is detailed in the attachment 1, the Planning Commission Subcommittee memo. Some of the work that we're looking to do is revise and modify various definitions, changing the permitting process for signs to make it a little more streamlined, the changing list of prohibited signs which are exempt and signs which are exempt from sign ordinance, consolidation of sign types and allowances by zone, and temporary signage allowances. The other items that we are considering as a part of the update is allowing new types of signage within the city and prohibition of certain signs. We are also looking into incorporating these sign design guidelines into our actual ordinance. Currently, they serve as a separate resolution, and there's been direction from the Planning Commission Subcommittee and the City Council Subcommittee to include these as actually codified into the city's ordinance for sign regulations. The other aspect is that we are looking at how we calculate allowable sign area. We are also looking at exploring the comprehensive sign program process and allowing deviations from our sign ordinance for applicants as opposed to going through the plan development or specific plan process, which allows applicants to propose different types of signage. That existing process is a little burdensome for applicants to go through, so we're hoping that through the comprehensive sign program process that will allow deviations through a staff level review and to address other First Amendment issues. Some of the signs that we are exploring that we currently do not allow are roof-mounted signs, as you can see in the top left and the bottom left, allowing A-frame signs which are shown to the right, which is the herbed meats and wines. Currently, we only allow those in the downtown specific plan area, but we are considering allowing these citywide in specific commercial zones. And the bottom right shows the digital media sign, which is currently not allowed. The only reason why you're seeing this one is it's permitted in the planned development zone for the Toyota of Escondido. One of the big items that we are evaluating is the methodology used to calculate allowable sign area for a business. A brief survey of surrounding cities found that we are one of the only cities that regulate sign area based off of building square footage. A lot of the surrounding cities use either the building or lot frontage. In our research and in our own experience, we've seen that small pad tenants, similar to the Dutch Brothers and the smaller Starbuckses, tend to be at a disadvantage when it comes to allowable sign area. And so we're exploring allowing more sign area based off of the building frontage or the lot frontage. And this was supported by the both subcommittees. Staff anticipates a draft of the ordinance to the Planning Commission in, this should say spring 2024, based off of existing staff resources. And we intend to have it to City Council in late spring of 2024. It is my intention to request the formation of another subcommittee before we bring it back to the entire Planning Commission for a final vote. And that will conclude staff's presentation. Thank you.
Okay, any questions?
Yeah, and I'm sure I missed it, but if you bring up the rooftop signs, what was the discussion on that, to like not allow them, or are we considering allowing them?
We currently do not allow them, and so we would be exploring allowing them based on the use of the site, but currently they are prohibited to be roof mounted.
Okay. And I don't know if I can ask this. Can we, or we feel free to ask questions of the committee? What was it, a subcommittee? I'm just wondering what prompted the subcommittee or staff to say, yes, maybe this would be appropriate? Because I kind of want to know the thought process.
That was based on just experiences. We've received a request for these type of signs.
Okay.
And currently trying to find a way to allow them just based off of our experience with these proposals. It's only been a handful, and this is not to say this would be a blanket allowable type of sign across commercial zones. We are looking at specific use types, specific building types, whether it's based off of the square footage of the building. But this is really trying to explore different types of signage in the city. But we have received requests for these type of signs.
Okay.
And we received generally positive feedback on what we're exploring from the subcommittee.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
And can I ask, will you go back to the page of the comparison to Escondido to other cities?
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure I understood this. So, am I getting this? Other cities allow signage on the buildings because it's beneficial, but we don't.
It's not. So this section is actually based on the methodology of how much signage we allow. So I would need to do some more research and see if these cities allow roof-mounted signs. But this is based off of the calculation on how we determine how much signage you're allowed. And these cities all use building or lot frontage, and we use building square footage.
A couple questions I have. One is, I'm interested in the rationale, because we have right now the square footage for the sign, allowable square footage is based on building square footage. You mentioned, rather than frontage, you mentioned that gives a disadvantage in some cases. And I'm wondering if it gives advantage in others. For example, and I'm just thinking out loud here, but if you have a building that doesn't have frontage, but say is a significant building, a huge contributor, huge store, huge business, but they don't happen to have very much frontage, the square footage calculation gives priority to a large retailer, let's say, that may not have frontage, right? So while you say it disadvantages those that have frontage, it may advantage large businesses that just don't happen to have. So is it fair to say there are some advantages and disadvantages to either calculation?
There are, but from what we've experienced and kind of what we see in surrounding cities, the idea, and I don't really want to get into specifics of what we're exploring because the calculations are still kind of in the progress of being worked out. But for example, if you have a building that's very large, let's say it's 100,000 square feet, and maybe it doesn't have a lot of lot frontage, you can either calculate it on the building frontage, and if it's a 100,000 square foot building, it's going to have a big building frontage, correct? And so it's one or the other.
I see what you're saying is it's not the frontage that is the signage area.
No, it's
just
the
frontage.
entire building.
I got you.
Yeah,
That helps me understand. Okay. Thank you for that.
And if there are concerns about sign blight, there would be a maximum. So they wouldn't be allowed, let's say, and this is just tentative, 200 square feet max. So there will be a cap on what they're allowed.
Gotcha. That's helpful. Thank you for that clarification. The second question I have, though, is you mentioned, I think, that staff level review is something that you're pursuing in this. Does that indicate a desire to shift from a discretionary process for sign approval to an administrative process for sign approval?
So most signs are reviewed by staff. There are just a handful of signs, like regional market signs, which are the signs you see like in Ardo Parkway, or the freeway-oriented signs that come through the Planning Commission or City Council. That comment was more in reference to the comprehensive sign program process. So currently, we have, through the comprehensive sign program process, it can be approved by the zoning administrator, or I believe the city planner. But that doesn't really allow an applicant to deviate from the sign ordinance. They have to still be consistent with the sign ordinance. That comment was more in reference to allowing applicants to deviate from the sign ordinance through the comprehensive sign program process and allowing staff to approve those deviations depending on threshold limitations. And so if they exceed those thresholds, it's very much possible that it could be back in front of the Planning Commission or the zoning administrator. But that is something that we're exploring.
So for now, currently, what would trigger a discretionary process for a sign approval?
Off the top of my head, I want to say just the regional market. I believe they're called regional market signs, and I don't believe we have a lot of those. I want to say we only have one, and so currently a lot of signs, like I said, are processed at a staff level. The only thing that we are considering requiring discretion from the Planning Commission, and this is again all tentative, is the allowable digital media signage. And we're talking very large digital media signage where maybe a conditional use permit might be appropriate.
As I think about the discretionary process, our involvement as a Planning Commission with the signs, I'll give you my perspective and I'll share it with everyone, is that when we're talking about saying we haven't traditionally allowed rooftop signs, and now we're talking about maybe allowing those signs, I look at the pictures of rooftop signs and I say, I love the fact that in Escondido we've been restrictive on things that other cities have not been. I drive to places and I see what I consider junky looking places with a lot of gaudy looking signs. We have standards here that prevent some of that, and I like that. I think that's a positive stewardship for our city planning. I'm uncomfortable with saying, let's erase some of those prohibitions and let's erase some of the discretionary process. So we're saying, let's throw a bunch of ugly signs up and let's not even involve the discretionary planning commission to say whether that's okay or not. Those two things together cause me a little concern.
I'd like to add on that, I was thinking about just the sidewalk signs and thinking of some of the shops that are just next to each other. It seems like every 10 feet. And if, as far as discretionary, how is that going to be monitored? Because I'm thinking of foot traffic, crowding, and it's just going to look junky. It's not going to be aesthetically
The A-frame signs?
Yes.
I agree.
So how how do you say yes to some and no to others if it's just 10 feet apart and people are kind of having to weave in and out and parking lots are closed, the cars, if you think about those sidewalks. I think of East Valley Parkway and just some other areas. Where do you?
Yeah, I think like I said, we allow them in our downtown specific plan area, which makes sense. Downtown's compact. You tend to see A-frame signs in downtown areas. And so we would most likely look at the design guidelines that we have for A-frames within the specific plan and incorporate those either citywide and for commercial zones or specifically just for outdoor dining areas. But it would be, it wouldn't be a free-for-all. There would be some sort of guidelines. And whether that's borrowed from the downtown specific plan, that's all in consideration.
I agree with Commissioner Fitzgerald's concern. I had the same picture in my mind of East Valley Parkway with all the countless shopping plazas and the countless businesses in each shopping plaza. What controls are we going to have of each of those businesses and each of those shopping plazas lining the sidewalks and the thoroughfare with these A-frame signs? I mean, I've lived here 50 years. I remember when they started applying all these regulations and that you admire. And I remember how we were all so proud of the city for being progressive in that. And I do agree. I hate to see us take a few steps backwards.
Ventura Boulevard, I used to live in Woodland Hills. I go back and I see that being used to Escondido now, and I think I don't want Escondido to go that route. So
I agree with both Commissioner Spear and Commissioner Fitzgerald.
At the same time, I think that we do have to be more flexible with the type of signage. I remember, some of the restrictions, they were just outdated. So there has to be a better middle ground. It's not just all of one or all of the other.
And I just want to throw at you too, Ivan, our historic downtown, I know that is the downtown specific plan area, but I also want to I really hope when new businesses are coming in that there is some consideration for the historic preservation, and these things are being run by the HPC, especially for our historic downtown area when it comes to signage. Can you assure me, please?
I will say that the good thing is that this is only for this ordinance update would only affect properties outside of the downtown specific plan area. The downtown specific plan has its own sign regulations, which take into consideration the historic nature of the downtown area. So we wouldn't be touching that as a part of this update.
So I want to throw in, I don't know that you mentioned it, the idea that we have design guidelines for the signs too, which are not really, there's no enforcement for that. They're just guidelines. And so there was conversations about how do we make those, put some teeth into the guidelines so that either the signs have to follow them, or you mentioned if you have a comprehensive sign program, you might get more leniency on your signs if they complied with these guidelines. So the guidelines document was actually a pretty good document. It was put together very well, and maybe in and of itself it's not perfect, but it was a very good document for its time, and so we encouraged him to take that stance, to make the guidelines, make it either you have to follow them, or if you do follow them and you're under this comprehensive plan, you get some benefits.
If I could ask another question. In the current ordinance, if an applicant is in disagreement with city staff and their determination, is there the ability to appeal that up to Planning Commission?
There is actually, yes, that is correct. Planning Commission can review appeals for sign permits that are denied by the city planner or director.
Okay. All right. I thought so. And the sign that came to us, and it was for the fish. Yeah.
Fortunas. Mm-hmm.
What was the reason for that? Because it seemed like there was a disagreement whether it was a freestanding or a wall sign.
I believe it was because it required a design review, and it was within the downtown specific plan, and that required a design review.
Okay, and apologies, I just don't remember, but I do remember the discussion about it being a wall sign versus a freestanding sign. But I just don't remember the reason why it actually came to us, and I wasn't sure if it was upon appeal or if it needed planning commission approval because of the type of sign. Does any of the commission remember?
So I was not present for that, and since I am coming from our long-range planning side of things, I don't have the most pertinent information for that request, but, and Ivan, correct me if you have more pertinent information, but a sign design review in general can be elevated to planning commission by the city planner or director of development services if they feel that it requires a more stringent level of review.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, we good? Thank you, Ivan.
Thank you.
Okay, future agenda items. Does anyone have something you'd like to have put on the agenda? All right, oral communications, there's nobody left. Christopher, did you want to say something? Planning Commissioners report. Anybody will have some comments?
Yeah, I have a comment.
Okay.
I was thumbing through the city's budget that they presented to the city council, and I came across an interesting option that I thought we should all be made aware of. It was not a recommendation, but in pursuing potential cuts, it was an option, and that's to eliminate the planning commission. That was listed as an option, to eliminate the planning commission, and only the city council would be responsible for all planning decisions. Again, it wasn't a recommendation, but it was listed as an option.
Was there any discussion, or this was just in the report?
Their report, it was in their presentation to the city council.
Okay, and anybody else? All right, city planners report. Welcome, city planner.
Yes, thank you, Chair Paul. To clarify, we have the tentative future agenda, which is provided in your staff report or in your agenda packet. So as I'm sure Adam iterated many times, the tentative future agenda provides a general projection of anticipated projects forthcoming over the horizon. Generally speaking, it is tentative, so things are subject to change. And as you're aware, we have some exacerbated staffing capacity concerns, so please take that with a grain of salt that could be changing. And as my first planning commission, I'm going to say that's it for the city planner report.
Oh, Can I ask you a question? On that note, Veronica?
It has to be related to clarification, so.
It is. I'm just
Great.
curious. You mentioned that the scheduling of those future agenda items is really a question mark. I'm just asking to shrink the question mark a little bit. Specifically, do you have any feel for when the Costco and the In and Out, is it soon? Is it a long ways away? Any rough numbers, idea?
So the In and Out, that I don't have any rough numbers on. I'm still transitioning with our staff to identify their workloads and find out where things currently lay. Costco, we anticipate before the end of the year.
Okay, thank you.
So now's when you would tell us if the next meeting is going to be canceled or what you think might be on it.
The next meeting will not be canceled. We have one item. It'll be the 2023 Omnibus, which I will be bringing before you. And that is the only thing scheduled. It's a public hearing item.
Okay. And then I'd also like to say under informational presentations, you can scratch CFDs.
Question on timing for that as well, or I'm not on timing, but being that it is the future agenda item, is there reference on the city site that would give us anything to look at prior to our packet?
Pertaining to the tentative future agenda items listed here?
Or pertaining to the omnibus?
Oh, that will be sent to you as part of your packet. There isn't currently any documentation on the city's website until the packet is posted.
Okay, thank you.
We're adjourned.